Hello, story seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Welcome to this Write Like episode.
As you know, in these episodes we talk about famous and infamous writers while tackling prompts in their honour.
Style, structure, tone. We intend to see what happens when we borrow from the greats.
Our writer today is the mother of the science fiction genre, who wrote in her preface to her magnum opus, Frankenstein, invention. It must be humbly admitted, does not consist in creating out of void, but out of chaos.
She is now rightly regarded as a major figure of the Romantic movement. We are quite obviously talking about Mary Shelley.
Who else could it be?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was published anonymously first.
That's true.
And also, people thought it was Percy Shelley for ages because he wrote the foreword.
It's
Which is some fucking male wallpapering bullshit right there.
Oh god, yeah.
This is far too good.
If it was from M. Shelley, they'd be like, I've never met this Martin Shelley before. But
we should refer to Mary as Martin for the rest of this podcast.
I'm going to insist that we don't.
She was something of a prodigy, really. Like 18 when she wrote this.
Unbelievably young, isn't it?
Yeah, after running away with a married man at 16. So she was quite a special lady.
A go-getter, I believe, is the technical term.
Definitely.
And, you know, to be that age and sort of inventing genres as you go, that's some intense stuff.
Yeah, I sort of get. I don't know. Like, obviously we don't go too scholarly on this podcast, but
Yeah.
I get the sense that Percy was pushing her quite a lot to realize her literary potential, her authorial destiny.
Yeah.
Both from his stuff and her stuff, like it seemed like he was really keen for her to be a great writer from a very early age.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just sort of, there's a lot of pushing going on here, and fortunately she didn't like break under the pressure, and she created this and other, not just Frankenstein, but she wrote other things obviously as well. But she was sort of lost to history from a very sort of like patriarchal dominated view of the Romantic period, and didn't really start to get a fair shake until like the 90s.
God, that's such a shame.
Which is really recent in terms of this kind of thing.
Really recent.
Yeah. I think that was when like a first biography of her was actually like published, which is bonkers if you consider like how many things have been written about like Coleridge and Blake and Keats, like all these other romantic figures.
And how important Frankenstein as a story and Frankenstein's monster as a character are just to the lexicon of horror, to the bloody zeitgeist.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So very much overlooked up until fairly recently, when everyone seemingly on the internet discovered how much of a sort of like original like OG goth badass she was.
Bad bitch. That's the
bad bitch. Yeah.
Real bad bitch.
Yeah. She is pretty important to this kind of period, and also, as you say, now, because she's clearly the progenitor of she is the beginning of science fiction in many ways.
Even in some educational spheres, still not recognised as such, overlooked in favour of people like Poe and.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, that.
It's so odd.
It's so called odd. Like the other name for Frankenstein is the modern Prometheus. Like it's fiction about science with horror elements. Like it's got everything that science fiction normally has in it.
Yeah,
it's very clearly a science fiction book. Just they didn't have the words for it at the time.
Yeah, I know we've spoken about it a little bit off mic, but you're in a similar position to me, aren't you? Where you read Frankenstein quite young.
Yes.
And I shamefully or not, I don't particularly think shamefully, but I've never gone back to it. But I do remember enjoying it when I was a kid, struggling a little bit because the language is very sort of twisty and flowery. So not
Yeah,
not
it,
having the easiest time with it, but still really enjoying it.
it's I mean it's a great yarn. It's a great story, and I think you've got to as a modern reader, particularly as a kid, I think you've got to be sort of hacking back the jungle, so to speak, in order to find the good shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did encounter her again at uni.
Yeah.
During a module on romanticism, and then also like connected stuff from her dad Godwin and her mum Mary Wollstonecraft, who was also like is also like now seen as like a very early feminist icon, who again didn't really receive a fair shake until relatively recently, and even like Percy Shelley, her husband, sort of encountered that at university as well. You know the poem Ozymandias?
Yes.
That's him.
Okay.
Which is it's a I remember I got chills the first time I read that poem. But I would say like for me, Mary Shelley has sort of eclipsed them all really. Maybe
No,
not like yeah, like just of those names that I've listed there, maybe not of like the whole romantic movement. I think there's some like it's pretty difficult to get away from Keats.
yeah.
And you know the whole lot of them like Wordsworth and Coleridge in particular, like some great stuff. And Blake was crazy, like truly mad. Plus, they were all like my understanding is that they were all fucking each other. So
Well, yeah, you would be, wouldn't you?
yeah, we haven't even mentioned Byron yet. He
What,
fucked
the
everybody.
mad bad Lord Byron?
Yeah. That's that's the old story about where she wrote Frankenstein, isn't it?
Yeah.
She was locked in a like a guest like a villa or something with a bunch of bored English people who included Byron and Percy. I do find it a bit weird that it's often termed as like a competition that they wrote, that they had a competition of ghost stories. I think they were all just trying to entertain each other rather than have a competition.
I think there was probably a competitive element to it. There always is. Like, even if you don't mean there to be, like, I would say comfortably, even doing this podcast, if you come away and you think, oh, I feel like my story could have been better. Not like I lost that one, but like, oh, I need to get, like, my edge needed sharpening there. I don't feel like I came in at 100%.
Mm,
I think writing does do that quite well without having winners and losers.
sure, like a galvanization rather than
Yeah.
like a spur to improve. Yeah.
I will. Also, I've got a quote written down from
Oh yeah.
Frankenstein.
Wicked.
It's actually from the monster Adam, which is, "If you comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends." Like, it's phrases like that why this book is so good.
Yeah. That's really good.
Like, I went back and revisited the book. I hadn't for years and years, and like more than half my life. And then I got to that, and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm writing that down."
Yeah.
That's obscene. That's such a great, like, not a good sentence. That's a great
Yeah.
2-sentence moment in a book.
Tonally, it just blows your socks off, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Love it. So she was also really not a fan of short fiction, which is interesting
Sauce.
that we've chosen her for this. So when I was doing my research for her, I found that so she did write quite a few like collected short stories to be published in various magazines and such. But I think she hated it because
No.
she's quoted as saying, "I write bad articles," and by articles she means short fiction. I think in this case, which help to make me miserable. But I'm going to plunge into a novel and hope that its clear water will wash off the mud of the magazines. So I'm fairly sure she would strongly disapprove of trying to capture a bit of her voice in short fiction.
We've got a thing about this, haven't we? Picking writers who wouldn't want us to do what we're doing.
Oh.
Well, with that in mind, then let's get to it. We have our own mad scientist, don't we? A bibliomancer by the name of Eusteris, and he needs stories to create his monster. So, you're up. Your prompt this time is The Last. Take it away.
The first letter. Dearest Camille, do not be alarmed at the state of this letter. I suspect that a certain yellowing has set in upon the paper, and perhaps a cobweb or two may have enshrined my words by now. Know that the sentiment remains fresh, though the ink is dry. I have devised this method for placing these missives close to your person, so as to circumnavigate misplaced paternal censorship. You know that I have spent much time in your home, along with those assorted others drawn together by some unspoken connection, discoursing with your father upon the practical application of his utilitarianism. He is a wise man, and I will not say it is a failing of his, but I disagree wholeheartedly with his disdain for my suit towards your body and your mind. That I am married is of no consequence, when the passions that rule me swell over the promenades of my mind and wash away all thoughts of my existence before our meeting. My experiments with light have astounded me, and I believe that a final test on the morrow will change the way humanity interacts with the rest of creation. The world would be so changed as to break every old-fashioned convention, and I predict that there will be no impediment to keep us from each other's arms. Look for my words in the same place. I will write again, and soon. Those last words puzzled me as I finally returned the letter to my nightstand's drawer, having keenly absorbed every pen stroke in it several times. The candle, nearly guttered, revealed that the paper was indeed aged and swaddled in ancient erosion lines of spider silk, as though I'd pulled it from a tomb instead of my bedside. It had not been there that morning. Of all the poets, writers, and dilettantes who flocked to my father's drawing room, his was the face my thoughts lingered on. Small moments between us crystallized in my memory, repeated through my days, with seemingly ethereal light eclipsing all else but ourselves. A scientist, rare enough amongst the largely literary crowd of my father's circle, and a man not content to be idle, I hungrily listened for any news of him when he was abroad. He was so often spoken of as being there, speaking at that, doing such and such, that I began to believe he was capable of existing in multiple places at once. How else would a man speak in the afternoon under the glass of the botanical gardens of Paris, and also be dining with Dr. Robert Darwin in Edinburgh the same night? I dispatched the candles flickering, and nestled myself fitfully in bed. I have always loved the darkness, and my eyes widened to peer into it. I would, as a child, imagine all sorts of things upon that black canvas. That night, however, terror crept upon me. The welcoming emptiness now seemed busier. Flitting shapes ran across my painfully squinted eyes. I forced myself to blink and rubbed at them, but the darkness remained a different country to the one I had left behind with the light. Nameless things reached for me, whilst others waited for me to run, and I became paralyzed by their presence. All that night I saw the phantasms of the darkness take on their true forms, and congregate to perform increasingly violent and erotic displays of orgiastic devilry. My body, pinned to my bed by my mind's fear, began to painfully miss those small movements one makes in the night. Though I lay still, I wept, and felt the tears run over my still cheeks and chin. The creatures were unrelenting in their attempts to scorch the sense from me, and time seemed to have stopped, or else I was trapped in a pocket of the world that some call hell. It was not until dawn's first light began to banish the darkness that I could move again. I had no tears left, and instead fell from bed with a thump as I willed life back into my limbs. I opened my bedside drawer and beheld that the letter remained, though not as I had left it. It was tied off with a ribbon and bore an unbroken seal. The last letter. Camille, I have, in my haste to change the world, done something unspeakable. I fear that I have broken time itself, and what I have seen has left me with no doubt that there is no God. My experimentation with light led me to believe that it was not only illuminating the here and now, but also the line of the light could be traced through time and space. I began to see it more like a cable attaching the past to the future, along which we are travelling. With this in mind, I fashioned a machine not dissimilar to the funicular systems hypothesized by the scientific community of Lyon. My suspicion was, if I was to send a counterweight object in one temporal direction, I could travel the other way. I was completely correct. So simple was it to move through time in that fashion that I began to use it to accelerate my life and career. The utility of it, as your father says, was engineered towards my own benefit. That was sufficient for me until I met you, and I perceived a pleasure that could occur within my existence. A pleasure that bridges mental and physical realms. I had to have you, and in order to do so, I had to change the world, not just for myself, but for everyone. I resolved to make it so that my wife and I had never married. The method providing absolute certainty of success was, of course, to prevent her from being born. I did so, yet when I returned to the present in my own house, I found her a corpse upon the stairs. Her physical form remained, yet she appeared to have been in a state of decay for many years. Horrified, I buried her secretly and knew that with such an apparent crime, that I must resolutely tread a path towards our love, alone. To see what I might be able to do to change the world, I resolved to see its end, and calibrated my machine to find the end of light's time. I arrived upon a dim world of barren rock. All memory of life was gone, and the sky was no longer filled with stars. The structures of the universe had stretched beyond their bonds, and all that energy was diminishing to become entropic last glimmers of light. There was no divinity here, only a scientific progression towards a universal mathematical stop. Yet I was not alone. The so-called demons of the mind that have plagued mankind persisted still, lingering in those very last moments. Their existence, confined to liminal spaces, had expanded to fill the void left behind by the dying of the light. So desperate were they to survive that they latched on to my fear. Every last one of them accrued at the end of time, and parasitically clung to me on my return journey. I have unwittingly brought all of the denizens of the void from our past, present, and future back to one point in time. They will find those dark places in the world and work to pry them wider. I have no notion as to the extent of the damage that their machinations might do to the human thought. There is no salve or good news to combat this evil holistically. There is nothing for humanity but an eventual entropic end. There is undoubtedly no celestial importance to our existence. Yet, that does not mean that our existence must lack meaning. We can strive to make our own meaning and live our lives thoroughly so that our enjoyment, physical pleasures, and laughter push back against that darkness. It is with this in my heart that I must ask you to be my wife. Be mine, dearest Camille, and we will have each other in the night. Our flesh will intertwine, and through our passion, we will create as much life as we can muster from our bodies. I wish to love you all of my days, and I dare to hope you feel the same way. I will not divulge every effect of his last letter upon me. Suffice to say, we were married in Edinburgh 2 days later. That night, as we consummated our union, I peered over his shoulder in the midst of our passionate throes, and saw the darkness gathering at the corners of our rented accommodation. The phantasms waited there, intending to master us. I extinguished our candle, and gave my rising pleasure voice. I knew at that moment we would defeat them with our ecstasy. It is our only recourse against the devilry in the dark.
I fucking loved that.
Cool. I'm glad.
You absolutely found the style, the form, the actual narrative structure. You absolutely landed Shelley there, man.
Oh, wicked. I think a lot of the sentences weren't 3 lines long.
I don't know.
I avoided that. There were a few long ones. Trying to do those long ones in a Scottish accent was. I mean,
Yeah, also, I would say, well done. You went for the accent and landed it. Well,
you think so? Well,
yeah, good lad.
Okay, all right. I was fairly pleased with it, but I'm also horrendously apologetic if I've offended anyone with that Scottish accent. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. All the things that I was trying to do with it when I started writing, I completely failed to do, which was kind of fun.
What were you trying to do?
I was trying to create. So I was trying to write it as an epistolary. So they were sort of all the bits of it were supposed to be letters or others, basically all letters.
Yeah.
And I was also trying to create a frame narrative, which is what Frankenstein is.
Yeah.
Which is, as you know, just the story. It's a story within a story.
Yeah.
And I don't think this does either of those things because there's two sections that are not letters,
Mm-hmm.
and there isn't really a story within a story. Everything's told. There's like two storylines intersecting with the two characters. So I don't think I can claim that it's either, but I don't care because I liked it. So.
I think, in a way, it's a story within a story, but not the way around that you intended. I think
Quite possibly, yeah.
the story
Maybe.
is their romance, and the story within a story is this his scientific discovery, and the kind of almost Lovecraftian madness that he finds himself in.
Yeah, it's sort of that whole stuff is rooted in this like early utilitarianism thought of Mary Shelley's dad, so Godwin, which is all like it's almost like proto-nihilism in a way. Is my understanding. I could be entirely wrong,
Okay.
but it's essentially like do things that make you happy. Roughly.
What else is there?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like you need to have like everything. He needs to have the property of advantage, pleasure, or happiness, and you want to try and avoid pain.
Yeah.
Etc. Etc. Etc.
Ah,
So, yeah.
I've got to say, I got actual chills at one point in your story, and it was when he said about he had to make sure he never got married to his wife, and the surest way to do that was to prevent her from ever being born.
Yeah.
Just like the idea of someone having that perspective and that leading into, and because of that, and because I've been to the end of time and I've seen the madness, like all madness that has ever embraced mankind, do you want to shag me?
You've
And
got to
her
make it
being like,
sexy, man.
definitely.
It's all hips and nips in the romantic period, man. You've got
All
to,
hips and nips.
you've got to get a good deal of like longing and then shagging in,
Yeah.
but tastefully.
Yeah.
Tastefully.
Tasteful shagging.
And it's got to have a point because they're screwing in order to prevent the dark demons from doing something.
I mean, it's starting to sound like a manifesto, Ben.
It is, isn't it? No, I thoroughly enjoyed writing it. I felt like I was like riding pretty high on the kind of horror that Shelley goes for.
Yeah.
And also that like sex drive that just is there in the
Yes.
1800s. It's just it's very obvious.
It's definitely a thread that does go through the work. Like now we think of Frankenstein's monster as like a big green dude with bolts in the neck, but Adam is actually quite muscular and almost perfect, isn't he? He's made of.
He is like he is described repeatedly as being like so repulsive that people assume he is evil.
Yeah.
So I think
That's the stitching, isn't it? That I know he's not green. I can't remember.
It might not even be that. He might look perfect. It might just be that something's uncanny about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think you could interpret that in a few different ways. But yeah, no, I had a lot of fun giving that a go. It was the shit. It's got a lot of stuff in there from what I'm aware of about Mary Shelley and the people around it. Like, for example, the father is based on her father. She had a nightmare which led to her writing Frankenstein.
Oh, the science in yours was fascinating, by the way. Really cool choice
Oh yeah,
of the light bending, and yeah, absolutely wicked. Especially kind of having that concept drip fed in of like but how could he be in Edinburgh in the evening and France in the morning? And yeah, absolutely, just a really cool of that time science fiction concept.
The thing that I thought that I possibly got right, or I definitely enjoyed about that particular approach, was the fact that there is like some kind of permanence still in whatever past he leaves behind.
Yes.
So the letter has cobwebs on it, and he only knows that there's going to be cobwebs on it because he's already killed his wife, and he knows that that's how things work when they travel through time like that.
Yeah.
When they get affected by time, sorry, I should say, because his wife was alive one moment, and then it was as if her form had been decaying for her entire lifetime.
Yeah.
Which is possibly a horrendous. Like the implied death is horrible.
Oh yeah.
You just start decaying.
That's some. It's like
Stumble up the stairs.
Mother Gothel, Disney's Tangled, for a much less literary version of that death. That's two right likes in a row that I've brought up a Disney film.
Some kind of Disney fanboy.
Listen,
Oh.
I mean, slightly off topic, but some Americans are cancelling Disney at the moment, aren't they? That's
Are they?
yeah, it's they didn't mind the previous possible bad stuff about Papa Walt, but they don't like it when you talk about female body autonomy. That's not allowed, Ben.
But anti-Semitism and racism is.
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Oh, okay. Right. I'm not sure about that one, but I think.
Yeah, I'm going to take this moment to say we don't agree with that. It's weird. It's weird, and I thought it was worth bringing up, and I'm probably going to edit this out.
What if none of it's okay?
Oh, well, nothing's
dear.
okay.
We should have a B podcast, like a B-side podcast called Nothing's Okay, and it's just the bits that you cut out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So had a lot of fun with it. She is such a cool figure when you get into it. There's some stuff in her life. I mean, it's starting to get to the point now where people just are like, it's on like meme groups.
Yeah.
On like Facebook and Twitter and that, just sort of reposting cool shit that she did, or like weird stuff that she did. Do you know all the stuff about Percy's heart?
Did she have it in a jar?
She kept it in a silk cloth or something in a jar in her writing desk. Yeah, because he drowned.
Yeah.
And when he was cremated, his heart didn't burn because it had calcified. So
That's insane.
The heart was preserved. It was also supposedly unusually small as well. I assume that's because it had shrunken from the heat, and it was just like the calcified sections that remained. But I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, when I was looking into his death, I read this bit about how this London newspaper, this like Tory London newspaper, wrote saying Shelley, the writer of some infidel poetry, has been drowned. Now he knows whether there is a God or no. Which is perhaps the biggest echoing bitch slap from the time that I'm aware of. It's got some mustard on it, hasn't it?
Oh god, it's so spicy.
But that's the reason why I'm talking about how there is no God in the story.
Yeah.
Because
he told you.
Because my character went and checked, and no, there wasn't. Thanks, Tory London newspaper, the Courier, bitches.
The Courier.
Courier.
It turns up on a motorbike.
Tories are so up themselves, man. More for the B side, I think. There.
Welcome to the B side.
Right. Okay. We've spoken about my story for long enough. Let's get yours.
I don't know that we did speak about your story that much there, Ben.
Did we not? Did we just talk about other stuff? Go on then, hit me with some stuff. What could be better?
What could be better?
Yeah.
I think it's another one where, and it may be why she didn't like short fiction, it would benefit from more. I think especially because you were trying to, having the letters and stuff, with more time for those to happen and for that concept to be kind of twiddled with, it would give it breathing room. But you are constrained by our word count.
Yeah.
Lofty science fiction concepts struggle at this word count.
Also, there is always going to be some fat when you're trying to emulate this kind of style because
absolutely.
It is very wordy. So I totally agree with your point. I think there were a few strands that I'd like to develop more, and I think the whole thing could be more developed. I think it just about does enough
Yeah,
in some,
I absolutely
like,
think it works.
yeah,
But if I had to pull a thread,
I
it would
agree.
be that it would be great to have been able to put another 2,000 words even into
So I
it.
mean, this we say this so often.
Yeah.
Normally about my stuff. I don't know why. I assume that's just the way that my like creative mind works. Like just on a slightly like your like punchiness is just second to none. I've never encountered anyone that writes like you do. For some reason,
I think
I
it's because I write everything like a joke. So
I
it's
was
kind
just
of like set
like
up,
mm,
rug pull, hit.
I don't think it all
Whereas,
I don't think it all works like that. But yeah, it I think there is a lot of that going on.
but no, even my stuff that isn't funny, it kind of uses those same techniques because it's how I understand telling
Mm.
stories. Whereas you write like a writer, so there's so much more there.
You can't disguise a put down on yourself as a compliment to me. I'm not accepting that.
Hey, I'm saying that I write like a comic. That's great.
That is good. It is good. Um, yeah, but I think like I'm like repeatedly, ambitiously, possibly overreaching
Do you
conceptually.
find that you'll be in and you'll be thinking, yeah, I like this idea, I'm in my groove, and then you look and you haven't got many words left?
Yes.
I think, yeah, then it sounds like you're absolutely spot on with where you are with it. It's by the time you're reaching our word count, you're like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And
Mm.
maybe
Could
we
use an
need
extra 500 or so here.
like be in the B side. The B side is just things we've had to cut out and massively over the word count stories that you've written, and it's going to be way more popular than this.
Yeah, I mean this came in at 1492, so I was 8 words under the maximum word limit here.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so there's just like without stripping out some of the more like sort of flowery, Shelley-esque, romantic period language, there's just no more room for story there.
I mean, there's a good chance that that's just it. I think if you'd written this same story in your style, you would have got everything you needed in
Maybe,
the word count.
maybe. Um,
That's why we do these experiments.
yeah, but that being said, like I am happy with it as it is.
Yeah,
But like,
I would not be unhappy with that at all.
and also I think I deliberately write sometimes wanting to leave people wanting more of it. I think that is a deliberate thing that I do when I'm writing. Like when you're putting together something, you're like, oh, that's gonna titillate.
Yeah.
I think there's a degree of that, but perhaps too much of a good thing. Worth thinking on. Worth thinking on.
I mean, I'm the same with lovemaking, Ben. I always leave them wanting more. Roughly, 40 minutes more.
Or just the back half of the first minute, mate.
You know what they say? 30 seconds in heaven is better than no seconds in heaven.
That's truly disgusting. Right, let's fuck. I mean, your story.
Oh dear. The last. Letter 12. Dearest sister, you are well acquainted with the failures of my heady youth. Indeed, the last I gazed upon your countenance, we were but babes in arms ourselves. Or, so it seems at least, to the weariness that now clings to my bones as cobwebs to the beams of cottages abandoned. As I say, as long apart as we have been, and with no hope on my part of receiving a return letter, for where indeed could such a missive be delivered, I have thought every day of you. What else could I have held within my mind, have buried deep within my heart to act as the coal that kept steam roiling around the wretched boiler of my being, to keep the mechanisms grinding and wailing until my wicked work is done? There are but 2 remaining now, dear sister. As soon as my hunt is completed, I will return to you. Oh, but to feel the soil of England, most beautiful of lands, beneath my feet, and embrace you once again. This time it will be an act of triumph, And though I may still weep, as I did the last I held you, it will be with joy, not anguish. With the promise of my return, faithfully, P.W. Frinton. Chapter 1. I had not planned, at any point, to gaze upon the architecture of Lisboa, Portugal's glittering gem, yet here I found myself. The sun-drenched beauty of its terracotta shades lost utterly, my vision clouded completely by the focus of what I had come here to achieve. It is, in truth, a crime against the wonder of the world that I have swept my eyes across so much of it, never once stopping to allow the awe to crush me. To truly understand that I am a single ant within a colony of many, and that to stand upon the hill and gaze into the abyss of grass should fill one with terror and delight in equal measure. Instead, my view has lingered ever on the grassy lands of England. So eager am I to return to them. I was so placed as I was searching for a man by the name of Cohen, a fellow not possessed of great strength of mind, nor truthfully physicality, but as my memory served, a razor-like wit, which had served him well in ingratiating his way into our collective of chums. It was from the address book of another childhood acquaintance, a brute of a lad named Abel, who had captained the school's rugby team to a number of successes, and was now deceased, that I had plucked the current residence of Cohen. My contact with the pair of boys, and in fact the many branches of ne'er-do-wells I had frequented the parks and dancing halls with, had diminished in the years that followed our escaping from the monotony of the schoolhouse. In that way that many young men are prone to do, we had grown apart. In spite of this, I had an appointment to keep with Cohen, though I was almost certain he would have no memory of making it, nor eagerness to reacquaint, given the circumstances of our parting. I found his residence to be empty, although the effects therein were the man's to a fault. His mannerisms had evidently changed not a bit from the sometime jester I had exchanged smirks with across the chalk-smudged halls of our infancy. I decided the best idea would be to wait, my knowledge of the city being limited to what I had gleaned on the short boat trip here from other locals heading home. They had imparted to me which side streets would lead me to the best coffees and local dishes. Having seen much of Europe these past 3 years, I had no desire to avail myself of any more coffees, or variations on sausage or pastry. The sun had retreated to some other nation's sky by the time that Cohen returned. A calamity of noises accompanied the man, who was clearly the worse for imbibing drink. "Good evening, Cohen." I alerted him to my presence, as is only polite, though he seized at his hip for some weapon which was no longer there. I recalled hearing he'd been in the military in some capacity. No doubt some position that allowed him to exert his power over others. "You'd like that, wouldn't you, Cohen?" I finished the thought aloud, which seemed to startle the man.
"Frinton, what in blazes are you doing here?"
His eyes went wide, but this was not unusual. So far, 10 pairs of eyes had gone wide.
"I thought I'd never see you again."
"Hoped," I corrected him, for I knew that in his heart lay the curled serpent of dread, ready to strike as he realized my purpose. "I'm here about Elise." Speaking my dear sister's name brought a smile to my face, which I chased away. It was unbidden, and not deserved by this worm of a man. Cohen's eyes had darkened, like pools in canopied forests they were, unreadable to all but those who already knew what they said. A look of realization was spreading across the face of Cohen. I realized then that word may have reached him before I did.
"It has been you, hasn't it?"
he said, as though to twist the spear of accusation from my grip and point it instead at my throat. He was not incorrect. The others had died, quite rightfully, by my hands. As I say, it is about Elise. I shook my head, as though the memories might fall out. You see, Cohen, she has remained insensible for 10 years now. The doctors say it is trauma. The knife I've drawn from my hip is a familiar comfort. It makes my arm feel whole again. The weight of memory is too much for her, you see.
You killed them all. Abel, Armwell, Steerage.
He had backed himself against a wall, still no physical specimen, and still not too bright. I closed on him, as a tiger would its prey. I did, Cohen, as now I will kill you. I could see the beads of sweat forming on him, like settled steam upon a kettle's belly. I was reminded then of that same sweaty head as I watched him grunt and grit his teeth astride my poor Elise. My view was so close, almost face to face with Abel, a hand of each of ours on her wrists. I thought of each of their faces, their bared teeth, their hot breath, their brutal blasphemies as one by one they had soiled her insides. I didn't remember her face, though. In truth, I think I had burned it from my memory. I did not look at her as I took my turn, as I let the sins of other evil men wash over me. I did just as they did, in order to be their friend. And then they left me, to go to their universities, leaving me with no one but my poor, sweet sister, so ravaged, stunned, mute since then. I knew after some years of prayer what I must do. Blood for my blood, their lives for hers. It was simple. It made so much sense. By the time the thought was finished, he was sliding to the floor. No more breath in him. No whimper of, "Oh God," this time. Then there was only me, the last sinner. "I shall be home soon, dear sister," I said, as I opened my throat and freed her at last.
That's a banging ending. That's a really good ending.
Thank you.
Yeah, that I think because of the way that you were dealing with the style, it did need it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there was a bit where I thought you were fridging the female character as a motivation, and then it turns out that actually he's participated in the rape incestually,
Yeah.
which is fucking awful
Yeah.
and really cements it as something else. Like it adds a level to it because you completely got like this idea of like a 19th century revenge tale.
Yeah.
It was almost like a modern. It was like a Denzel Washington movie,
Okay.
but
No, I can see
but,
that.
but from the 19th century.
Yeah.
Um, with like little funny things in it as well. Like, you know, if you come home, you knock your lights on, and then you hear someone say, "You'd like that, wouldn't you?" As their way of announcing that they're there.
Yeah.
That's really scary and also truly bizarre. Like from a point of realism.
Yes.
Yeah, so it had loads of nice touches, but like I think you went like full overblown on a lot of the language. So I could feel you like feeling a bit restrained and not being able to
Yeah.
get to the point that you wanted to get to as quickly as you wanted to get to it.
I think I definitely struggled with getting the structure, or possible that might not even be the right word. Like the form of the sentences. Like I
Syntax
felt
maybe,
like,
like word order.
yeah, it's like I was writing and then unwriting and rewriting myself
Right.
in a way
Got
that
you.
I don't know that I was equipped to do.
I don't know whether it's not equipped to do it. I mean, fundamentally, that kind of like oldie style of writing doesn't read very well, does it? Like to our like modern eyes. You know, we
Yeah.
said it earlier when we were talking about like reading Frankenstein as kids, like early teens or whatever, and you are just sort of like, the fuck is this? And it does take a line of like true majesty, like the quote that you read out,
Yeah.
to set your imagination on fire. And
Yes.
once it's burning, you can plow through pages and pages and reams of too long description and overblown like plotting, basically.
Yeah. But it's like same as reading Shakespeare, isn't it? It's once you are in the right mindset to read the language, it flows and it's easy.
I
But
would say
it's
like
getting there.
I agree in like principle, but I
Yeah.
think actually all of the language of Shakespeare is truly accessible once you have the key.
Yes.
As soon as you have the key, you can just unlock Shakespeare, and every line, pretty much every line, is gold.
Yes.
That is not the case with 19th century fiction. There is so much dross on almost every sentence, and then occasionally, sometimes quite a lot of the time, depending on who you're reading, there will just be like this work of absolute purity, like this sentence or this paragraph or even a whole chapter that just melts you and
Yeah.
changes the way that you see the world. And it's doing that with the overblown language, so it clearly works. It's just not. It's not a percentage game. Like like restricting your sentence length, making things clearer. It makes your hit rate for a successful sentence just go up.
Yeah.
And yeah, but perhaps maybe you can't achieve. Maybe that they or we, whoever's writing, can't achieve the greatness of some of their lines without having a swing at those big overblown lines.
Absolutely.
Um,
I don't think I would rush to write in this style again. Having
I
done
think
it.
it felt like you were getting a lot out of it. I enjoyed it as a story, so it was a success.
Yeah.
But possibly just because I know you so well, but I could feel you bucking against, trying to get to the end of a paragraph because maybe then you'd get to the next bit.
Yeah.
And then so the start of it's really good. Then it kind of slows down a bit in the middle, doesn't it? Where there's the not confusion, but like the sort of shroud of mystery as to who this guy is, why he's doing it, what
Yeah.
who are these people, etc. And that bit sort of like is a bit slower than your well, it's a lot slower than your normal writing style, but also you've deliberately written it to be a bit slower.
Yes.
And then it comes back up with a fairly glorious ending, I would say. Like the reveal of the incestuous rape is that's a real gut punch. She's like, oh fuck, that's awful. And then of course he's going to kill himself,
Yeah.
and that like dread feeling that you know exactly what's going to happen at the end, and you don't really want to see it happen because then it'll confirm your worst suspicions that you've imagined about the story. It almost makes you a party to the crime.
Yeah.
To know what you would do in that situation. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
So,
I think in terms of narrative, definitely happy with it, but in terms of like structure, definitely I'd want to like taking it away from the right. Like there is so much I'd change.
yeah, I mean, is there anything that you would like keep from this style?
I think it drove me to write a lot of things in ways I wouldn't have tried to normally. Even down to like the way that I described characters. And I quite liked that.
Yeah.
And especially there's that actually the paragraph when he's he looking at the sweat on Cohen's forehead and then remembers it all. I think there I managed to get a handle on okay, I could say this sentence in 4 words, but then kind of like stretching it like sugar strands out into something far more delicate, just as delicious but more delicate and intricate and beautiful, that I really enjoyed. But in other places I felt like I was doing it and it didn't warrant it, but it had to be there,
I totally get it. I think that's really well expressed because I felt like I did that a bit with mine as well.
Yeah.
And that image of stretching out the sugar, I think that's something that could be like a really useful visualization for future writing, where you're like, does this paragraph need just to be like drawn out? Is there enough horror, suspense, drama, romance, whatever it is,
Yeah.
in this section that I should actually be pulling this out a little bit more? And I
I think,
think like I would take something from that. I think that's a good thing to take from this right like.
I mean, even in just saying that, I think looking at writing a bit like the way that I look at food and cooking could be an interesting thing to do. Because I'm not a very prescriptive cook. I know you're exactly the same.
Mm.
Recipes are fine, but sometimes you need to throw stuff in and then taste it and see how it is. And there are so many techniques that you can try that maybe you wouldn't normally because you don't know how to make puff pastry from scratch. But if someone else has done it, you know, I'm now looking at how Mary Shelley made her pastry and I'm trying to mimic that in a way. All of a sudden I've got a new technique that maybe I'm not going to use every time, but one day I need puff pastry for something, and then it's in the toolkit.
I think if Mary Shelley ever made puff pastry, it would somehow turn out like dark as midnight
Like,
without using
it
food
looks
dye.
burnt, but it's delicious. What
But
the
it's not burnt. How did you do this? How did you capture the night sky in the oven?
She just winks at you and dives backwards out of the window.
Oh, what a unique voice though. Like I was sort of having a think about her and the way that she uses language, because we're talking about like looking at it through like cooking analogy and that kind of thing. Um, and there's just like there's a certain rawness to the way that she uses language, and I think you and I have like tried to push for it on occasion in our stories, and perhaps even got there a few times. But it's something just natural for her. And I think the reason I'm sort of proposing this, someone else has probably already said this, but I think the reason that there is that rawness, that kind of slight bit of roughage to the way that she wrote these eloquent sentences, was that she didn't have some sort of homogenized approach to learning her letters.
Yeah.
So she wasn't taught in a schoolroom how to read and write. She learnt, supposedly, learnt how to make the shapes of letters. When you do that bit very early in school of like drawing the A exactly how they tell you
Yeah.
inside the lines, all that kind of stuff. Instead of doing that, she traced letters off her mother's grave.
I mean, apparently that's not the only thing she did on her mother's grave. But
True. She also had a fair bit of the old fuck.
the old fuck.
I was trying to find a useful one. I landed on the old fuck. Anyway, yeah, but
We're not stepping away from that yet, Mr.
I'm
Literature.
stepping away. I've stepped.
Come on then, you old fuck. What?
Oh fuck. Yeah, but that just that bit of strangeness, that bit of goth to everything that she does.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. It is a bit of a comment, I think, on the way that at least we're taught such a basic thing as reading and writing in the UK, because it is like a classroom 50 deep. A, B, C, like rather than like
Yeah.
her learning was an intrinsic part of her learning was also processing and learning about grief and loss, and then she is famous for writing about grief and loss. Like there's a really clear link there, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's worth getting a bit of like an edge, using your experiences that are not normal, that are atypical in everything you do, whether it's cooking or writing or singing.
Because I thought it was interesting about saying it earlier. I've pulled up the description of Frankenstein's monster
Oh yeah, go for it.
about his beauty. So his limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful! Great God! His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness. but these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes, that seemed almost of the same colour as the dun-white sockets in which they were set, his shrivelled complexion, and straight black lips. So yeah, I think it's...
So constituent parts are beautiful, but the whole is in some way ugly.
Especially, because the creature is philosophical and in other ways mentally beautiful as well. But yeah, that idea that there is just something truly horrible about the sort of unlife of it that you can't see past. That 1818, man, from a woman
18-year-old.
scarcely into adulthood.
Yeah,
phenomenal.
it's beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
I think, in all honesty, I had partially dismissed the recent rise in Mary Shelley's popularity.
Yeah.
As some level of like performative identity.
Okay.
I think that, which is quite easily done, I think, when you see it in like meme groups and that kind of stuff. She was incredibly impressive.
Just, yeah. And I don't know, like these roguelikes are, some of them are really fun, some of them are quite difficult, and interestingly, like different ones for both of us. But I normally feel like I can take something from it, but this one, there are definitely 2 or 3 tricks that I think I'll use again, like where I struggled to write in this style and I had to kind of switch around how I looked at things.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to revisit that when I struggle, and that's... Thanks, Mary.
So I think if I was in your shoes, or if I was in a combination of our shoes, I'd much prefer your experience with this style,
yeah,
than my experience with Tom Clancy's style.
Such a fun sentence.
Because I don't think I got anything from doing Tom Clancy's style.
What I got was a good old-fashioned American boner.
You got like Team America World Police vibes out of it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I was like, oh, this is shit.
I reckon Mary Shelley could have made nuclear submarines fun.
I think there would have been a great deal more fucking.
Hunt for Red Cocktober.
Oh.
Oh.
Byron's the captain, right?
Oh yeah, obviously.
Because Percy's drowned outside the submarine.
Still played by Sean Connery.
What? I'm Byron.
It's me, Mad Bad Lord Byron.
Phenomenal. Right, okay, so if you want to give it a go, you want to join us in our endeavours and attempt it, we'd love to read it. It's 800 to 1,500 words in the style or approximating or borrowing something from Mary Shelley's approach to her writing. In particular, we both went through the lens of Frankenstein here, I guess. Yeah, tweet at us, let us know, and we'd absolutely love to read it. So definitely go for it.
Right, we better do Stoker now, eh?
Spoilers.
Jokes, we're doing Tom Clancy again.
No! Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For magnificent beardery, let's cast the Chinicus folliculale spell on Gary Laird. For
rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Burn, and for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?